Welcome to Planning Professional Development with Members, a webinar for AmeriCorps Vista leaders. Skill development and growth is a big part of the Vista experience, and this session looks at ways leaders can help their members identify, prioritize, and plan to meet their professional development needs. I'm your host, Andy King, Senior Training Specialist with AmeriCorps Vista. Our presenter is Jennifer Rakow, whose 15 years working at AmeriCorps included 3 years cultivating, monitoring, and supporting Vista projects and piloting statewide in-service training events for Vista members. Jennifer herself is an AmeriCorps alum, having served as a team leader with AmeriCorps and CCC. In her current work, she designs and delivers training and coaching on a wide array of topics, and she considers any day that includes supporting national service to be a good day. Welcome, Jennifer. And Jennifer, we're not getting your audio.
Well, let's try it again. How's that, Andy? Better?
That's perfect, thank you.
I love it when it's a quick fix. Thank you so much for the introduction. I'm excited to have this opportunity to share practical tips and tools with you. When I oversaw Vista at the state level, Vista leaders were the critical link between our office's largest Vista project sponsors and our members. Because they knew their members' strengths and skills, we responded to a host of challenges from racism to Hurricane Katrina and got great work done. And my goal is that today's resources help you and your members successfully meet the challenges you face today and in the coming months. Every good training starts at the results. Today's results for you include describing a professional development cycle that can be used with AmeriCorps members, describing how to use tools to implement that cycle, and explaining what's called the 70-20-10 model of professional development planning. In a few places, we'll ask you to share in the chat based on your experience, as a few of you have already done. And I hope you'll be generous with your ideas and resources because they'll help your colleagues see new ways to apply the tools that I'm introducing today. So, what is professional development? We sometimes hear about it in different contexts, and you probably know it has to do with getting better, building skills, learning. Some of your early chat comments indicate some basic understanding, but let's see a formal definition. We'll use this one that comes from Business Dictionary. Professional development is a process of improving and increasing capabilities of staff through access to education and training opportunities in the workplace, through outside organizations, or through watching others perform on the job. There it is, improvement through different kinds of learning. I say improvement through different kinds of learning because professional development is different from career planning or job hunting. So for example, Colin, I saw your comment about resumes. We're not going to be talking about building resumes today. But according to the Emerging Technologies Impact on Society in 2030 report, 85% of jobs in 2030, which sounds far, but is really only 8 years away, have not been invented yet. So you need the ability to analyze what you need to learn, figure out where to begin, and make a specific plan to gain the knowledge you need. In other words, the ability to gain new knowledge will be more important than the knowledge itself. Closer to home, the tasks a Vista performs will likely evolve over the course of their year. So they'll need the ability to continually gain new knowledge. So many of your projects involve building the capacity of an organization or a program. Professional development at its core is building the capacity of the people who are doing that work. Andy?
Thank you, Jennifer. All right, so now that we know what we mean by professional development, as well as its importance in the workplace, let's get you to share some real current professional development needs that your members have, or at least those that you're aware of. So for this activity, we will use the chat panel. If you don't see the chat, look for the little speech bubble icon at the bottom of the screen to open it up. And remember, before you send your comment, please make sure you've selected everyone so that your colleagues can see your genius idea. So again, the question is, what are some professional development needs of your VISTA members? And a few of you had already shared ideas before we got started. Jennifer already mentioned the one from Colin, but others had talked specifically about professional development needs related to the VAD, like specific tasks or activities that they would be completing as part of their VISTA assignment. So without going into any more detail than that, a couple of you had mentioned things tied to the VISTA assignment. Another one, a little more specific, was around computer skills, using things like Google Docs, Excel, and some other online tools. And let's see what else is coming in now. So we've got a bunch here that look really, really good. Some suggestions here: getting along with a supervisor, so maybe that managing up or interpersonal relationships, researching grants and grant proposal writing, planning for sustainability. A couple of you talked about capacity building here. More grant writing, volunteer management, asset mapping, leadership training, and then as well as life after VISTA, or starting your own nonprofit. So Jennifer, what stood out there for you?
Andy, you said a lot of them. There was one comment that came in at the very beginning of the webinar to this question that we've skipped over, and I want to address it very quickly. It came from Judy, and she said something that I think happens to a lot of leaders and supervisors, which is sometimes a member will ask for professional development that makes total sense given their VAD, and other times, as you put it, Judy, it seems to come out of left field. And I want to just share with you that curiosity is going to be your superpower here. When someone says something, it's only out of left field for you. It's not for them. And the best thing you can do in that situation is, with sincere curiosity, ask them, like, well, what made you think of that? Like, oh, tell me about how that ties to what we're doing, or some very open question, because they'll probably make a connection that you hadn't thought about. It may or may not be appropriate professional development, but at least you'll know why they think it is, and maybe something they're struggling with. But yeah, these are terrific. And I like the range. We're going to talk later about different kinds of skills, different categories. And I think you all have actually hit them all this early, which is very, very cool. So thank you for sharing those. Now, think for a moment about how you knew the needs that you just put into the chat. There are only a few ways to know what someone needs to learn in order to meet their professional goals, or in the case of VISTA members, of course, their VAD goals. Someone can tell you, right? Or you can observe maybe what's not getting done, or maybe being avoided, or what's getting done but not well enough, or what's causing problems and complaints. There's one other way to figure it out. If you have a guess how else you can figure out what someone needs to learn, something that's not on the slide, chat it real quick. Yes, Katie, bingo, you ask. That's exactly right. It can be really hard for someone to admit they need help, especially to someone they don't know well. Also, sometimes we don't know what we don't know. You may have heard that phrase before. We don't know exactly what we need to learn when we're stuck. So Good questions are the foundation of an effective professional development conversation. Questions themselves are tools. To that end, I've inserted 2 or 3 questions you can ask your members as they progress through the first 3 steps of the professional development cycle that we're about to get into. And here's your first pro tip. Don't wait until there's a problem or a complaint to begin talking with members about their professional development. Use the cycle and the tools in this webinar to show that you're a leader who wants their members to do their best. You'll build trust and you'll have fewer surprises and crises later. On to our first objective, sharing a clear professional development cycle that you can share with your members. And Dylan, to your comment early on, everything we do in this webinar is information to aid you in supporting your members. Earlier, I said we'd talk about the professional development cycle as one with 4 steps. We'll cover the first 3 in some depth today. Identify, prioritize, and plan, spending the most time on the planning step since it's usually the most involved. Identify is where you list the skills you need to have so you can achieve your goal. So the essential question there is, what skills? At the prioritize stage, you'll choose just 1 or 2 skills that are critical to meet your most important goals. So the question there is, which are essential? And at the planning stage, you determine the most effective ways to build the target skills, or how do I develop those, right? And guess which one we already started with in our chat activity? Anyone can chat that answer very quickly. I know you know. It's identify. Yeah, Denitra, you got it. Thank you. So oftentimes, large companies design complicated models and tools for creating comprehensive multi-year professional development plans. And we don't have multi-years, most of us in Vista. So for Vista, I developed a streamlined 3-part tool to accompany this cycle. It's easy to use, easy to access. You can share it across devices, and it's doable during a term of service. It's also in standard Microsoft Office, so many people can work from their phones, which is especially important in certain service areas. And you can download this tool, which we're gonna refer to and use throughout the webinar, using the link in the chat. Thanks, Steve. I saw that pop up as I was speaking. Amazing. We'll begin with the first step. As Demetra said rightly, it's identifying skills each member needs to develop in order to achieve the outcomes on their VAD. Identify, again, is the step where we ask, what skills need to be developed? During this first step, members look at what they're supposed to achieve according to their VADs to help determine the skills they need. So a member who's been serving for a few months or more probably has a good sense of the skills they're using a lot and those they wish they had or wish they could improve. If you've been serving as a leader for a while, or if you were a Vista on the project before becoming a leader, you likely have a lot of insight, not just from the VADs, but also from feedback from members and those who interact with them. If you're brand new to the project, this is a great time to look at your members' goals through the lens of what skills they need to accomplish them. Make sure to consider challenges, any changing circumstances. Also, identifying skills and knowledge that multiple members need may help you decide where to invest your effort as a leader, as opposed to areas where you might encourage an individual member to be more proactive in finding opportunities to learn something that only they need. When you open the self-assessment tool we just shared via the chat, you'll see directions and examples of skills on page 1, followed by space members can use to list up to 6 important skills. So let's look at the first section of the tool. So this slide is a zoom in on part of the tool that lists 4 types of skills to consider. Technical skills, that's where those computer skills come into play. Personal growth skills, transferable skills, and finally, leadership skills. To help your members brainstorm, the tool lists half a dozen examples of the types of skills that could fall under each category. And right under those broader topics, there are a few examples of specific skills that are fairly common across Vista. And then there is a blank fillable chart. The skill categories help people talk about the kinds of development they want or think they need. And there's plenty of room for you to add and get specific. Don't forget also to have people list skills they currently have, but that they'd like to or need to strengthen. A tip here is that character traits or character strengths like humility, honesty, self-regulation, social intelligence transcend categories, and those are always good to build. So here's a chart with some Vista-specific skill examples. Don't be overly concerned about which category a particular skill belongs in. Some may fit in more than one. This part of the tool is meant to help brainstorm and bring skills to the surface. The important thing is to try to identify at least a couple of skills in each category. And you can see, Judy, I hope you can see where soft skills fit in, and Jay, where some skills here that might be helpful when working with a supervisor, right? Some of those things are a little bit hard sometimes to describe. To begin this conversation for the first time, once you get past, how's it going with your member, try some open questions. So remember I said questions are tools. Some possible questions here are, what do you need to learn to excel at whatever the task is that you're concerned about? And this lets you see what the member is already aware that they need, which may or may not match what you're seeing or what you're hearing, but hopefully aligns with their VAD. Also, you could ask, what skills do you feel you need to practice to meet your goals? And what are you already doing to learn or practice? And what could you learn that would add to what you already know? This third question serves multiple purposes. It may tell you things the Vista is already doing, perhaps even resources that their sites are providing. It also gives them the message that you encourage and expect them to be in action. It also reminds them that building a skill they already have, but could be better at, is a valid goal. People don't have to build skills from nothing. In fact, going from okay to good or good to great is often easier than starting from zero. Let's move on and look at prioritize, where the key question is which skills. At this point, you'd have the first part of the tool completed with a list of up to 6 skills. So how do you choose? First, you want members to end up with just 1 or 2 skills to start, especially if they're more than halfway through their service. Here's an example we can use as we move through the cycle and continue looking at the tools. Marketing and outreach activities are the most common VAD tasks. That's why I picked them. Deliverables might include materials, plans, and as many of you commented already, all kinds of communications. Perhaps your member has identified all the skill needs on this slide, right? Graphic design, social media, web design, public speaking, editing, etc. The prioritize step is where you'll help them decide which 1 or 2 skills to develop and to what level of proficiency. So public speaking in any way, Jasmine, they could be asking for donations, right? It's still public speaking, whether it's live stream, whether it's in the room, it's often essential for members, and it can be really intimidating even paralyzing. And it may be a little harder to imagine mastering than, say, learning Canva or brushing up on Excel. So let's prioritize the scary thing from our imaginary members skill list here, right? And remember that what do you need to, you need to do better, but it scares you, is a legitimate question that you can ask. So now that we have our skill, public speaking, it's important to gauge how proficient they are now compared to how skilled they need to be. This is also the step where thinking through how the skill applies to the VAD is critical. Make sure that improving these 1 or 2 skills will move the needle on their core goals. The next section of the tool, as you might expect, focuses on prioritizing skills and has an assessment sheet with a couple of examples filled in for you. It then has space to assess up to 6 skills and their connections to the VISTA's goals in order to pick the most important 1 or 2. So this member is building a sponsor's volunteer program capacity, partly through traditional community outreach, partly by communicating and training through the organization's existing customer relationship management system. They've recorded the level of proficiency in the current and needed spots, those columns, using a scale where 1 means a person has a really basic proficiency and 5 means a person has expert or the highest level of proficiency. So you can see here how the connection of public speaking to the specific VAD goals might shape how and with whom they choose to learn and practice speaking. Generally, we expect members to complete this form, and of course, you can do one for yourself. For this step, instead of me giving you some key questions to ask your members, we thought we'd see what questions you can come up with. Andy?
All right, thanks for that, Jennifer. So for this activity, we would like you to brainstorm some questions that you could ask your members who are having trouble prioritizing. Again, we'll use the chat, and again, please be sure you're sending to everyone. And we have a little music while you think. All right, we've got a number of questions that you've come up with, so I'll review just a few of them. Denitra shared, you could ask, are there any deadlines that you might need to meet? Or even just a general, can I help you with anything, as Laura suggested? Riley says, what barriers are you facing? And Patricia would ask, how do these skills connect to your VAD, to your assignment description? Colin suggests, what are the most difficult tasks in your day-to-day? Let's see, again, we have how could I help? How often would you like for us to meet? Would a weekly checklist help? And Iris suggests, what is your true objective? And let's see, Judy says, do any of these skills seem like something that you would really enjoy focusing on? And what would make it easier for you to improve? All right, so lots of great questions there. Jennifer, are there any questions that you didn't see here on this list that you think would be important to add?
The first thing is I hope all of you will take a quick screenshot of the chat because your colleagues have come up with really a terrific array of questions, a combination of open questions, right? Can I help you with something? I think Laura said, to very specific, are there deadlines? Would a weekly checklist help, right? Making offers, and different questions will work for different members, as I'm sure you can intuit. So a couple of things. First, leaning into enjoyment and strengths is really smart, Judy. People absolutely do better when they play from their strengths and they enjoy what they're doing. And we kind of forget that sometimes when we're very focused on goals. And I want to circle back to Denitra's comment on deadlines, because sometimes when folks are struggling to narrow it down, like to pick a skill or two, asking about urgency can be great. So you can say, like, which of these skill needs feel the most urgent, right? Oh, and Ryan just added, what does your supervisor require from you? Yeah, right. Are we missing anything absolutely critical? But again, also those how do you like to work questions, right? Like Laura said, how often do you want to meet? The other one that's very common is sort of how do you like to meet, right? Is someone better on Zoom? Do they prefer a phone call? Do they need to have a standing time, or is it a little more catch as catch can? So think about your work style as well as theirs. And if they know anything about how they learn best, you can also ask them about that, which I don't think I saw on here. Right, so some people learn really well by watching videos. I'm not that person. Other people learn well by reading or by trying things. Oh, Tammy, I love that late ad. What does your supervisor tell you that's most important? Right, so learning what the priorities are of your supervisor and beyond just what's on the VAD is really smart, especially if there's any misalignment between what the sponsor is expecting and what the VAD says. That's a really good question, Tammy, to get at that. Great job. Let's move on to the next step. You guys are definitely ready. So identifying and prioritizing brings us here to the planning step, where we figure out how the learning will happen. This is actually my favorite part because it leads concretely to getting things done. Remember, you want to facilitate your members' action and ownership, but it's ultimately their responsibility to act. Let's see how to complete this part of the tool. So on the next slides, I will share a list of circumstances to consider and to talk through with your member before brainstorming ways to practice and build a skill. We'll then explore the 70-20-10 model fully. And it's important to know that most professional development should happen on the job. You might be surprised by this, but it's far less about formal classroom training than about building skills where and when they apply. The next step is for your member to approach people who can help them put their plans into action. People who can connect them to opportunities in the organization, avenues to get feedback, and perhaps even offer them additional ideas. This is also where a member and a leader might talk about things that prior members have done, whether they worked or did not. Once the plan is complete, encourage your members to tell site staff, other national service members, former colleagues, friends, family, their whole network, what they want to learn or improve and why. They may be surprised when they tell that story who steps up and offers ideas and resources. You can revise if those people step up to help on the job or with mentoring or coaching or social learning situations. Leaders can guide members toward undertakings that have the best chance of success. And this is a key part of your role with this. For example, members who have more time left in their service term can often take on more challenging or complex professional development assignments. Similarly, if a member has some knowledge already or an expert peer who can act as a resource or a partner, they're likely to build proficiency much faster. And as a special note for leaders, if there are skills that several members need to achieve core goals, those may take precedence over individual needs, and you can create a community of practice so those members can compare notes, building supportive relationships as they share their experiences. Finally, urge members to think about how they learn best, which plays into what kinds of learning opportunities are likely to work best for them, and to be realistic about financial resources available. Professional development that leads to products and processes to make your project sustainable and that future members will build upon may be worth investing higher amounts of money and time. If ever there was an unnecessarily complicated part of professional development, planning is it. So we're going to uncomplicate it using a tried and true model that's been around since I was a kid, and it's called the 70-20-10 model. This is the last section of the tool. The purpose of the 70-20-10 model is to help you and your members think about the best ways to learn the skills that you or they have prioritized. And this is how people learn what they need to succeed at work. Again, it's way less about formal classroom training than about doing it when and where it applies. My greatest hope is that you'll look at this graphic and realize that the best way you can support your members' professional development is to try these tools for yourself and then ask your members to try them. This chart is a guide to where methods of learning fit into the 70-20-10 model. In the first column, the learning happens in the workplace by doing. For example, by job shadowing, taking on a stretch assignment, or participating in a community of practice. All 6 of these on-the-job items require active learning and usually direct application, which is what helps the learning stick. As far as what is the right amount, start with 3 to 5 job-based assignments or projects to practice the skill. This is going to be about where 70% of the skill building happens. Some opportunities your members can easily find and do themselves. Others, especially this middle column with coaching and mentoring options, may require your help. For example, you may help a member understand how to approach a potential coach or mentor, or even the difference between coaching and mentoring. Or perhaps you can secure an organizational membership in a professional network that would benefit most or all of your members. Members should try to plan 2 ways to ask others for targeted help developing the skill, and this is the 20%. That last column, the one that needs to be just 10%, is what most people think of when they think about professional development. Formal training in a classroom, or haha at a webinar, or at a conference. You're aiming for 1 book or conference or other formal training experience to learn a skill, just 1. We are currently in a golden age of access to high quality information at low or no cost. There are plenty of resources out there, including online courses, some with certificate options from universities and companies like Coursera, or by individuals like Udemy and Teachable. I mean, this self-study could include other things like self-assessments, doing research, and even joining skill-based associations. So here's some more questions for you to ask during the planning step, which get at being a resource and removing obstacles for your members. Having an ongoing discussion, not a one-off conversation, and signaling that you're going to hold your members accountable for doing this work. So, what opportunities exist in your current duties to practice this skill? What other projects, teams, or assignments would help you develop this skill? Who could help you? Who could mentor you? Is there someone you could shadow? Members may ask for an introduction to someone, or to take a class, or to be given a higher level assignment. So just listen openly and be ready to accept their ideas or guide them to new ones. So here's the sample. It's a completed 70-20-10 plan that's in the self-assessment tool that you have. And the download includes a page with 2 blank charts, one for each prioritized skill, to share with your members. So continuing here with our public speaking example, I intentionally used only ideas that could work and in some cases are actually easier online. Notice also that all these ideas are free of charge, except Toastmasters, where we've noted the current fee. Toastmasters also has solid resources about virtual meetings and other timely topics. Feel free to look into it. But I want you to see that this is doable for your members, especially because they're only addressing one or two skills. Even more nebulous, and I think some of you got at this in your early comments about what your members need, skills around professionalism issues, communication issues, right? Appropriate workplace attire, how soon we respond to email and with what degree of formality, and so many more. These norms, and I put the word norms in quotes, differ among organizational cultures and often cause conflict. I added this tip in this section because often these issues are not skill deficiencies, but rather people in conflict because of different assumptions. You actually don't necessarily need professional development. What you need here is agreements that work for all the parties, sponsor, member, leader, and service beneficiaries. And so I don't want you to get stuck there. Again, once your members have their plans, encourage them to share them. The more people who know what they're working on, the more opportunities and support will come their way. And frankly, the more likely they are to keep at it. So seeing all the learning options on a plan, you may be wondering how you, as a leader, would approach implementing this professional development cycle with a team of Vista members. So I'll briefly mention 4 possible approaches you could take. One approach would be to provide members with this model and the tool and let them work through the cycle on their own. You might have some individual conversations to support members when they need help, but this would be a self-assessment approach. And this direction works particularly well for very large teams. A variation on the self-assessment approach is to have members first work independently on a self-assessment and then go through it with a partner to share ideas. A partner approach builds in some accountability because people don't like to let down their partners. And it's flexible because only 2 or 3 people are involved with scheduling and whatnot. And it's often easier for people to admit what they don't know yet in this setting, rather than in a large group or with someone they perceive to be an expert. For this one, you'd want the partners to be very close to the same point in their service year, and you might also connect peers with similar VADs. A third option would be to provide one-on-one coaching with your members to walk them through the cycle of identify, plan, prioritize, right? And such an individualized approach could help uncover hidden talents in your members and unnoticed needs, but of course it also takes more time. A fourth option would be to take a group approach, leading the team in real-time activities that include self-directed work and peer sharing. A subgroup of your team may be able to self-facilitate and work through a step or the whole tool together. But for communication that pertains to the whole team, you might facilitate the work yourself. A group approach works really well when lots of people need the same information or when the facilitator's presence, i.e. you, increases the odds of the work getting done well. And of course, all 4 of these approaches can be used in person or virtually or any hybrid combination. And of course, all 4 approaches can use the tool that you just saw. One important tip. Many Vista members are newly out of high school or college or jobs where their learning and their training have been prescribed. So think about this. Teachers outline what and when to read and then walk through it, review it, tell them what's most important to learn. Entry-level jobs often have set training plans too, regardless of the employee's background. This work that you're about to do may be the first time your members have looked at a work plan or an organization and been asked, and you will ask them, to analyze what they need to learn and then been given permission to seek opportunities to do so. Andy,
All
let's
right.
pause for a moment. Yeah. Can you give, that's great. Chat them.
Sure. Yeah. Thanks, Jennifer. So one example that is widely applicable and it lends itself to on-the-job training improvement is writing professional communications. And that could be to potential volunteers, community partners, or internal staff, or others. So I ask you to take a few seconds to think about what kinds of on-the-job learning opportunities might help your members to learn or improve their skills around writing professional communications. So again, we'll use the chat for this and ask you to send to everyone. And I'll pause and give you some time to think. All right, we've got a lot of great ideas coming in now. So I'll read out a few of them and then I'll turn it back over to Jennifer. So a couple ideas around giving your members small editing assignments so they can sort of build up their skills. And that could be through emails, newsletters, resident letters. A couple of you mentioned working on newsletters, whether it's a single article or a piece of it, writing press releases. Oh, here's a suggestion about having your members observe the professional communication styles of other people in the organization, right? If they get CC'd on communications, they can see how and learn how managers are communicating with other staff, with donors, members of the public, officials, et cetera. So that's great. I love that suggestion. Gives people some real context and allows them to learn by example. Let's see, speaking. So in terms of written communications, keeping emails short and sweet helps them get faster replies. So sort of the carrot there about why do it. Let's see, working, sitting with them side by side, helping them learn how to be more efficient using a specific application for completing their monthly reports, and asking them to help out with newsletters or with fundraising communications. Yep, again, this idea of seeing how to word or how to phrase different types of communications to different stakeholders. All right, so Jennifer, what stood out for you here?
Well, you've read the comments, and I think rather than what stood out, what I want to say is these are great. And then there's the question of once you talk with them about doing this, what do you then do as a leader? So, for example, with Judy's comment that you read, Andy, about observing the professional communication styles of people in the org, and sort of looking at how managers communicate with different people, there's then a conversation about what they observed, right? So Judy, that's the key question for you in that situation is, so tell me what you observed and see if they figure it out, right? How people are molding their message to different audiences. The same thing is true for Tammy's comment about brevity. How do you brief someone? How do you make those succinct bullets, right? And so ask them to blind copy you when they try to do it, and then provide them with some feedback, right? And so this is take these great suggestions to the next level and think about what to do, right? So Colin, if someone's doing outreach with local partners, set some expectations or give them some kind of model or let them shadow you doing it once, and then have the postmortem with them, right? Ask them, so how did it go? You know, what worked well? What didn't? What would you do differently next time? So always be thinking about, if you give them an idea, or if they set themselves, which is I hope what will happen, a task, how do you want to circle back with them, not only to make sure it happened, but to also find out what worked and help them then take it to the next level and gain some confidence. So these are great. So terrific job, all of you. So we're going to move to the final stage of the cycle, which is learn, which is when members will put their plan into action, which is, of course, what your comments were driving toward. So once a leader and a member agree on a professional development plan, so they have their 2 skills, they have their chart, they have their actions, the leader's role shifts to one of supporting their learning. And that's what I was getting at when speaking about your comments. First, you're not going to wait, right, till they're halfway through their service and they're struggling. You're going to check in at least monthly to see how the skill building is going. I was asked earlier about whether this could be included in a monthly or weekly report, and I don't know what that report is, but certainly you want to be checking in at least monthly to see how it's going, whatever they decided to do, what's going well, what challenges do they have. You want to brainstorm, problem solve, troubleshoot, and otherwise help members with challenges they identify. You're a leader, you're helping them become their best selves. So share resources that are working with other members who might benefit, and frankly, with other team leaders like your peers on this call, because these comments have been spot on. Finally, keep a list of resources that worked well and those that did not, with information if needed on contacts, on cost, etc., to pass along to your successor and for the benefit of future members. Regardless of which of the approaches from a few slides ago you take, new ideas, interests, relationships, and talents almost always emerge as people work through this cycle, which is really exciting. So urge members to jot those things down, because those new ideas might be the first step to identifying the next skill they want to develop. They might also be helpful to another member of the team. Members, especially those who enjoy learning and have a good experience the first time around, are often motivated to keep going. And so the cycle repeats. So we have a quick check for you. Andy, you want to tell them how this is going to work?
Sure. Yeah. So as usual, we do have this opportunity to give you a chance to see how well you've been following along. So you'll see a little poll window pop up on your screen, and it has this question: which of the following falls into the 70 category of the 70-20-10 model? Is it one-on-one coaching, professional conferences, job shadowing, or online courses? So make your selection. Be sure you click submit so your response will get tallied, and we'll give you a couple seconds to get your responses in. It looks like about half of you so far have responded, so I'll give you maybe about 8 more seconds. Again, be sure once you make your selection, click submit. Otherwise, your response doesn't get counted. All right, we've got a few last minute responses coming. We'll hold it open for like 5 more seconds. All right, we'll go ahead and close that poll, and then we will take a look at the correct response. So the correct answer here is C, job shadowing, right? So the 70% of the model, again, focuses on the job learning. So of course, job shadowing was the best option here. And it looks like most everyone, 68% of you got that right. So good work. And thanks for participating.
Andy,
And
let's
we have,
get real and give them one more chance to share.
all right, yes. So as Jennifer said, we do have one more chance for you to share your ideas for building skills needed to meet the VAD goals. So after listening to everything that Jennifer shared on the webinar and what your colleagues have shared in the chat, what kinds of learning activities can you picture at your site or at your member sites and communities that you would try out? So these ideas can relate to any VAD activity. So again, we'll give you a few seconds to get your thoughts together and drop your ideas into the chat. All right, so we've got a few ideas that have come in already. Quickly take a look at some of those. So again, using that approach of asking your members, so turning back to them and ask them, what are they observing? What are they learning from their peer-to-peer shadowing or other types of on-the-job learning? Using previous VISTA members, your recent alumni, to advise your current members. Several of you mentioned mentoring and coaching and that job shadowing. And then there's some bigger ideas here. One around encouraging supervisors and members to have check-ins, and then helping the members understand that check-ins are not just about work, but it's also time to reflect on bigger goals and how you want to improve or move forward. Let's see, creating a script and using it as an icebreaker to do a role play between members and coworkers to highlight what is wrong or what is right. And using, bringing your visits together in a casual setting to see how their skills can work well together. All right, so great ideas there. Jennifer, I'll turn it back to you.
I love these, and I particularly love role plays. So thanks, Thomas, for that. But I actually want to make sure I have time to give them a few tips and listen to questions. So if it's okay with you, I hope you all saw some new ideas to try, and I'm going to move us forward. So I have a few final tips for you. First, have fun and keep the pressure low, right? This is about learning. Learning can be fun. It's about doing your best during your service. It is not a performance evaluation, right? So regular check-ins, as some of you I think are beginning to intuit, are the way to do it. So it's not some big anxiety-producing event. Next, these tools are designed so that you choose how much you want to lead and how much you want to give your members to do and then come to you for support. So think about that as you decide your approach. Next, the more everyone understands why you're doing this work and what's in it for them and for the communities they've pledged to serve, the better. So always remember to talk about the why. And finally, if you work through the tools for your own professional development, you'll be able to anticipate a lot of your members' questions and be familiar enough with the content and the language to support them smoothly. The more supporting members' professional development becomes a consistent part of your conversations, the easier it is, and the more you'll find yourself working in a space of growth and learning. It's frankly just one more potentially transformative piece of a transformative year or 2 or 3 of service.
All right. So Jennifer, thank you very much for sharing really so much useful information on ways to plan professional development with AmeriCorps members. We're going to get to any questions that you might have for Jennifer in just a moment. But first, I want to invite you to complete a short evaluation of the webinar. Your feedback will help us make these sessions the most useful for you and other leaders. That survey is probably already open in your browser window, but if not, the link is also there in the chat. And so this is time for your questions. If you have any for Jennifer, I again will use the chat panel for this. So if you have a question, you can drop it in the chat now. I didn't see any questions earlier, but I'm going to scroll back and look just to make sure that I didn't overlook anything.
Thanks, Andy.
Yeah. So, but of course, if you have a question now, feel free to drop it in and we'll get to it. Yeah, I don't see any questions that came in earlier. So, and I don't see any coming in now. So I'll take that as a sign that we don't have any questions at the moment. So Jennifer, again, I want to thank you for all that you've shared with us today.
My pleasure. It's been a terrific hour, and I hope you can send these guys their chat because they came up with really good ideas and suggestions. And we hope from our time together that you can all take home some strategies to use with your team. And I wish you all a fantastic service year as AmeriCorps Vistas. Yeah, you're thanking me. Thank you. This has been absolutely a pleasure.
Great. Thanks again, Jennifer. And this wraps up the webinar. I do want to thank our presenter, Jennifer Rakow, as well as our production team. Thanks to Bethany DeSoblin for instructional design assistance and our production team of Jeff Bannis and Steve Gray. Again, I want to thank you for your participation and sharing your examples today. I will collect those and we'll post them on the campus with the recording, and I'll let you know when that is available. And I want to invite you to our next webinar for leaders. It's on planning days of service with your team, and that's going to take place on May 19th. So we hope to see you there. Again, thank you for joining. This concludes today's presentation.